In 1963, many individuals gathered to see the Great March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech, and civil and economic rights were promoted for all African Americans. The African American culture believed that this was a step in the right direction, and they felt that change was about to come. African American children are still said to be inexplicably placed into lower level remedial classes, which do not allow them to receive higher level classes, giving them skills to use as they further their education or skills to use as they enter the workforce. African Americans are also said to be confined to lower level jobs, which do not allow for professional growth or monetary reward. And lastly, African Americans are considered to be the first fired and last hired, which may explain the unemployment rate for African Americans as being 2 times greater than what it is for whites. The purpose of this paper is to discuss considerations for career planning with African American clients by uncovering the history of the African American culture, discussing barriers that African Americans face as they enter the workforce, and lastly, giving recommendations for career counselors as they work with African American clients. The history of oppression of African Americans starts in the 1630 when the first slaves were brought to New Amsterdam. While African Americans were enslaved, they took on jobs that they were forced to complete, work long hours for, and got little in return. Through the 1800s, slaves soon developed strategies to get away from slavery and pursue their freedom, like using the Underground Railroad. It took approximately 3 centuries of slavery, discrimination, and fear of unequal treatment before African Americans began to see laws and amendments written into the Constitution which promoted their freedoms. Unfortunately, groups like the Ku Klux Klan were eventually developed, and they again brought fear and discrimination back into the lives of African Americans. Finally, in 1964, the Civil Rights Act was put into place, prohibiting discrimination of sex or race when employers were hiring, promoting, or firing. But still, African Americans are facing discrimination in the workplace. Even though laws against discrimination of race, color, or other minority descriptors are in place for the workforce, African Americans still face barriers when they are ready to find a career. Career barriers are defined as events or conditions either within the person or in his or her environment that make career progress difficult. Some of these barriers for African Americans include racial discrimination, equal employment opportunities, and differences in K-12 education. By the time African Americans gained some rights in the middle 1900s, they were competing for jobs with the majority race that was still being discriminatory against them. Since discrimination causes individuals to withdraw from reaching and setting goals, it may have been harder for African Americans to find or keep jobs. Racism is a career barrier because once it's experienced, the individual begins to feel discriminated against, feeling threatened, and they lose their ability to cope, and therefore they get rid of or disregard any career goals that they may have set. Another barrier African Americans face is equal employment opportunities. Couch and Fairley, 2 researchers, tested a theory of the first fired, last hired idea, and they found that African Americans are for sure the first fired when a business is headed toward a downward trend. They did also find that they are not necessarily the last hired when businesses are on an upward trend, but of course they are the first to be let go. Murray and Mosity, 2 other researchers, state that African Americans have historically been oppressed and therefore have restricted opportunities when it comes to careers versus other races who might have more opportunities when it comes to finding a career. If an African American is labeled poor, they may have a harder time being offered a job, and if they are offered and receive a job, they have a lower ability to achieve career advancement, and they do not receive monetary reward if they do have a career advancement. Lastly, African American students are reported to attend schools with lower graduation rates where classes may require less work and the instruction may be poor. African American high school students are found to be less academically prepared for college level classes, and may have inadequate information about how to get into college. This is a potential barrier for African American students who are looking to further their education or even learn technical skills to get right into the workforce. Since African Americans are not as prepared for college, they do tend to have a higher dropout rate. It is believed that the higher dropout rate could be attributed to the lower skills, or it could also be attributed to the differences in culture. They're used to being in the culture that they've lived in forever, and now they're going into a different culture that they are not prepared for and don't have strategies to work through how they can deal with that. School counselors could prepare African Americans for this change by teaching them strategies while they're in high school, or giving them more information to decrease that dropout rate once they enter college. Career counselors who work with African American clients must understand the importance of multicultural competencies, and this is where I get into the recommendations that they might want to consider. Career counselors should be very aware of their own cultural heritage and know their own personal biases. The counselor must also take time to listen and understand the client's history, as well as respecting the client's cultural expectations and values. Once that's established, the counselor will work with the individual, and they should consider which career counseling theory will work best for their African American client. Murray and Mosedy suggest that many of the already developed theories are based off of what works for white-raced people and how they can develop career readiness, which isn't the same, and it doesn't depict the occupational realities that African Americans face. Some researchers suggest using Afrocentricity, which identifies that African Americans have their own cultural values, attitudes, and beliefs coming from their own origin of Africa. And this is described to be better because it relates with African Americans at what they believe in, and it gets at their own original culture versus using something that's developed on the white culture. Ultimately, the counselor needs to decide which theory will work best for their African American client, and it may be one of the other theories that have already been developed, or they may want to look into more of the Afrocentricity. While students are still in high school, career counselors could also pair up with high school counselors to facilitate the process of career development for African Americans. Discussions or presentations could take place around the ideas of career readiness. It would be beneficial for African American students to have some discussions or view presentations possibly given by other African American individuals within a variety of different roles and careers in the work field. These presentations have the ability to open young eyes to see many career options and ideas that students could ultimately explore. The exploration of these careers could lead the students to research careers outside of education fields and health service fields, which are said to be the most common careers African Americans most commonly choose. It is also suggested that high schools pair up with colleges to have similar discussions with African American students so they can ensure that the culture change and the strategies are in place so that students have a less tendency to drop out of college once they enter. In order to decrease the barrier of racism, career counselors should discuss racism and discrimination with African American clients. The counselor should prepare their client for comments that they might receive once they enter the workforce. They can also develop strategies to deal with this for people in the workforce. And it's also important to discuss and develop these strategies so that they can overcome the challenges. Overall, the history behind the African American culture is heart-wrenching when considering the discrimination and mistreatment they have endured for 300 years. Understanding this history behind the African American culture will be important for career counselors as they work with African Americans to help break down barriers by developing strategies to overcome racism in the workplace, implementing role models, and defining career goals. Along with the barriers African Americans face, career counselors must also be sure that they consider their own multicultural awareness by reviewing their own cultural beliefs, values, and biases. With awareness heightened from all individuals involved and programs put into place, there is optimism that the number of unemployed African Americans decreases, meaning that they've gained skills to find and keep jobs.